Good evening, everybody. October the 25th, 2020, Redline Nova update. Gonna be honest with you, hadn't really done much of crap to the car this week. I've spent most of my time just sitting in a little roll-around chair stool looking at it, and I've come to some good epiphanies this week that I want to share with you guys. And I got a bunch of them. So one of the first things that I noticed was I've been looking at trying to size the front wheel that I was going to use on the car. And I found this to be flawed in two different ways. Number one, you've got to realize that the amount of travel that it has back in this direction as well as the front is, in terms of at least the spindle anyway, is really dependent upon the tie rod end. If you had that tie rod end way too far, run out right now, well then all of a sudden the spindle would have more angle to it like that, at which time the clearance you had back here up against the frame would not be accurate. And so what I realized is you have got to center the rack and pinion unit in order to be able to figure out what kind of clearances you're actually going to have. So I started off, I centered my rack and pinion unit, I connected my tie rod ends to my spindle, and then I realized, well, Ian, how do you have any idea if these tires are actually straight or not? So, rewind a long, long time. Back in my racing days, we used to use these things here called alignment plates, I think we called them. And so anyways, I took my alignment plates, and you can see there, I drilled some holes, I plasma cut a big hole out in the center of the unit there, and ta-da! I basically made a set of plates that I could bolt up to the car, and let me bring this thing back straight again. There we go. So, you make a set of plates that go up against the spindle, and when you install two of those things, you can then take a measurement from the inside to the back of the turn plate and can start to kind of see how your toe is set up on the car. And so I set it up to where I had about 1/8 of an inch, maybe 1/16 of toe in, and I figured that was pretty much where I needed to be in terms of, the front rack and pinion and everything. It just occurred to me a little bit ago that I've screwed this up even more. I can't actually rely on the measurements I'm getting, from my wheel simulation tool. That's what we'll call it, wheel simulation tool. I can't rely on those right now because I don't have my rotor in place. My rotor goes right up against the face of this thing, so basically your rotor affects your back spacing. So I've come to the realization that I got to get the brakes on this car before I can really count on, what type of back spacing I should be getting. So that was a really big epiphany that I had before I ran off and screwed this up a lot. So having a look inside the car, I've also come to realize down in here, let's see here if I can do this with the camera, I've been thinking about whether or not I wanted to drop my rear floor in the car down to the bottom of the frame rails. That way, your knees are not right up in your face sitting in the back seat of the car, right? And the thing I've got to remember here is my exhaust, you see it right there, my exhaust comes through the frame, not under the frame. And so I've got to account for exactly how in the world I would lower the floor of the car and not get in the way of the exhaust that comes through it. So I've got the exhaust there. I want to have my floor pan kind of lower here so that there's a distance here vertically, between the bottom of the frame and the top of the seat. So I got that to account for. I've also been trying to decide how in the world am I going to do the roll cage in this car. That's particularly difficult. Everybody else just runs a tube right up the inside, of the rear door panel right here, comes up, and then, turns right here and goes inward. Well, if you do that, then all of a sudden your rear seat kind of gets in the way of that right there. Sorry if my ability to work the camera is not all that great. It's a little difficult kind of looking over here and using my hands over here and then trying to worry about what you guys see as I do this. So anyways, I've been thinking about that. I'm also throwing around the idea of doing something completely different than everybody else does. And since I have 2 frame rails in the car, 2 inner frame rails, there's nothing stopping me from coming up here on both sides, bringing my roll cage up through the center, okay, and then turning outward, coming across here, turning inward, and then basically like following the sail panel back through there. That's not necessarily going to be as strong doing it that way, but it would be really cool, and it would help me to maintain this really cleanliness of the car where I don't have this bar coming right up through here, right? So that's something to think about. I've also been trying to throw around the idea of what should be the rear spacing of the rear wheel. And so I've got this tool in here set up with a 12-inch wide tire right now, and it clears everything, but it clears everything just kind of so-so. And so I'm thinking to myself, let me turn the camera around. So here's the tool, right? You notice that there's a great big gap in between the simulated tire and the current fender well right here, right? Notice here the distance from the inside of your package tray right here to the outside. Can you see that? Very, very small distance right there. So we have to decide how far is that inner wheel well, that tub, going to come. Is it going to follow along the package tray here? Is it going to follow along the stock tub right here? The more that you bring that inward this way, the less it affects the rear seat, which you can obviously see right there. The tire is really close to the rear seat right there. So what is the appropriate distance there? I don't really know. I'm figuring it out as I go. One of the conclusions that I've come to this week, I believe what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and fully weld the chassis up here very, very soon. I'm going to pull the car off of the jig. I'm going to go ahead and order the tires and wheels as best I can, trying to size everything, and I'm going to bolt it in place. I'm going to get an idea for what my stance is going to be, and then from there try and figure out, okay, you know, where am I going to fabricate my wheel well tubs in the rear. But more important than anything else, I want to go ahead and take the car to an alignment shop and get them to align it front to rear and basically get their seal of approval that, yes, Ian, the car is straight, it's going to track straight, the rear tires are aligned with the front tires, everything's going to be fine. If I'm going to have some sort of epiphany that something is off by 1/4 of an inch that you cannot adjust out and that I'm screwed and tattooed, I would really like to know that before I run off and spend the next 12 months fabricating all of the sheet metal around everything. So that's what I'm thinking that I'm going to do. I think I told you guys in my last video, I don't believe I'm going to be able to use that Camaro rear seat right there. It ain't happening. That's about it for this week. One of these days, I intend to probably will this car when I die to my 4-year-old son, Harrison. And so maybe one of these days I have this crazy idea that he will go back and watch all of these videos of Dad building the car that he owns. So I'll say, "Hi Harrison, Daddy loves you." Maybe one day this car will be his. I sure hope so. I don't ever plan on selling it. Hope you guys enjoying my video updates. Click subscribe and turn on notifications if you want to make sure that you don't miss anything. I would ask that you please click, I said subscribe there. Click the thumbs up down below. That helps YouTube recognize that, you know, what I'm uploading is not garbage and gives us some good rankings. So thank you. You guys have a great weekend. Appreciate you watching. Holla.